instead of talking to spiteful brother. Parents chose and attended his 28th birthday party that he threw last minute so that he doesn't feel bad instead of my wedding. But now parents claim that I turned everyone against them because no one showed up except for them. I, 31, male, got married a few days ago, but my family didn't attend. My brother Gerald was not even invited since we really don't like one another, so that was not a surprise. But even my parents didn't show up because at the very last minute, the night before my wedding, Gerald decided to have a crazy 28th birthday party. He sent out the invitations to all our relatives about a week before my wedding just to be petty and spiteful since he hadn't been invited. It was a pretty big deal as well. He had rented out a huge venue, gone all out on entertainment by hiring a live band and a stand-up comedian to perform, and I'm only assuming that the catering and drinks arrangement would have been at par. The entertainment, though they're not exactly nationwide popular, they're still pretty popular in the local circuit, and apart from that, I'm assuming that everything would have been pretty expensive as well. A cousin of mine showed that invitation to me, and for a couple of minutes, I was actually feeling paranoid that folks might end up attending his party instead of our wedding. But then even if they chose to do that, there was nothing much we could do about it. My wife and I both knew that people would have to pick: either they couldn't attend the party the previous night and then attend our wedding the next day because the party was being thrown in the city and we were getting married in a hotel that was almost 8 hours away. But we didn't want to say anything to our guests. We wanted to let people make their own choices, and we are extremely lucky that everyone chose to attend a wedding. In hindsight, it seems silly that we were even worried in the first place because, of course, a wedding is far more important than a birthday. The only people who didn't attend were my parents, which was quite unexpected because even though we had had a fight a couple of days before our wedding, I didn't expect them to actually attend his party and not bother showing up for the wedding. The fight had taken place on a call 4 days before the wedding, and after that I got really busy with last-minute prep, so I wasn't able to contact them, and they didn't bother either. But I never thought that they would skip it because the wedding is a very significant event in somebody's life, especially when it's your own kid. And the fight itself had also been about the wedding and the birthday because after my cousin had shown me the invitation, I had called my parents up and told them what was going on, and I thought that they were going to be on my side and that they were going to explain things to my brother and have him back off. Instead, they started telling me that it was my own fault for not inviting him to the wedding and putting our past differences aside. And now he had every right to be petty, and I couldn't expect them to intervene and try to defuse the situation since we're not kids anymore and they didn't think it would be appropriate. I have to admit I got a little upset with my parents that they were actually trying to justify what my brother was trying to do even though it was really spiteful and petty. So I told them off about it and we got into a minor fight, and so I hung up eventually after telling them that if they really thought that he was doing the right thing by creating trouble for us, then they should just attend his party and just not bother coming to the wedding. Then after that, I didn't speak to them until the day before the wedding. In the morning, while we were driving to the hotel, I kept trying to call them because they were supposed to come with us. But the car that we had sent to them had come back empty, and the driver had told us that he had kept trying to ring the bell and contact our parents, but nobody answered. So I kept trying to contact them the entire day, but nobody responded, and that night I was supposed to admit that maybe they would not make it. The next day, even in the morning, right before the ceremony, I kept expecting them to show up and still tried to call them, but they didn't, and I had to get married without them. I would have been upset about it, but then I was getting married to the love of my life, so I didn't let these things bother me at the time. And after the ceremony was over, I decided that I was not going to bother contacting them anymore since they had already missed the biggest milestone of my life. Later on in the evening during the reception, they finally called me back and I answered out of curiosity because I really wanted to know what they had to say to me. When I picked up, they told me that since I had asked them not to bother attending the wedding, they had done exactly that, but in spite of that, they still wanted to congratulate me. I thought that they were talking about the wedding, but then they told me that they were congratulating me not just for the wedding but also for getting my way. Obviously, I could see that nobody from the family had bothered to attend a party, and my parents were upset with me, and they made it very clear on the phone that they believed that I must have said something to everyone else to turn them against my brother because not only had they skipped the party, they had also shamed and lectured him for his behavior through texts and calls. Even though his friends and co-workers had attended the party, it had been a massive waste because he had assumed that a lot of folks were going to attend. But in reality they were only a handful in comparison to his expectations. And now Gerald is not just disappointed with the rest of the family. He has also ended up wasting a lot of his money, and somehow this is supposed to be my fault. Because my parents genuinely believed that I had said something to turn the rest of the family against him, even though any normal human being would have behaved the exact same way. So while I had them on the phone, I excused myself from the reception and actually went out to talk to them about the situation. I explained to them that I was really upset that they had decided to skip my wedding over something so petty on top of that, and they were even taunting me right now for getting my own way in spite of the fact that the rest of the family had made their own decision. I was furious with them. So I really tore into them and they told me that they couldn't care less about what I thought because they knew that I was jealous and insecure about my brother, and that's why I'm acting like this. That was the last straw. So I just hung up and blocked them and decided to enjoy the rest of the evening without thinking about these people because I didn't want them to ruin the best day of my life. And now it's been a couple of days since the wedding, so I finally decided that I was going to put out a statement about what had happened because a lot of people had a lot of questions about why my parents had chosen to skip the wedding, since they couldn't even imagine that they had chosen to attend Gerald's party. So I decided to send out a mail to all the guests explaining the entire situation in detail and telling them all about the party that my brother had thrown, the argument that my parents had with me and what I had said to them about not bothering to show up at the wedding, and then I spoke to them about the argument that we had on the phone reception. Basically, I put everything out and didn't spare any detail, and now everybody is cutting them off and yet again they're blaming me for it, saying that I'm going out of my way to create drama and be petty towards my family, and that might actually be the case. So AITA for talking about why exactly my parents did not attend my wedding in detail and turning the rest of the family against them. Edit. Alright, since a lot of you had a lot of questions about why exactly my brother and I don't get along well, there's no particular reason as such. Even when we were children, we were really not that close. But as we started growing up, we started getting even more distant. He always seemed to be a little jealous of me, constantly copying me and stuff, and it used to get on my nerves. So we started fighting, and by the time we started high school, we really didn't like each other. Then I moved out for college and then I stayed for work and I would visit home occasionally, but even on those visits, he would be totally insufferable. He would be taking potshots at me about my appearance, how much I earned and things like that. And it used to really get on my nerves, so I just started ignoring him altogether because I knew that I would have to see him and it didn't seem worth it to respond to him and pick fights. After a while, he realized that I was not going to give him the satisfaction and actually react to him, so we just stopped speaking to one another. And even when we would see each other at family gatherings, we would just ignore one another. So there really wasn't any particular incident that led us to behave like this. It was just situations that went sour over the years, and that's why we don't get along. And I didn't invite him to the wedding. I don't think I did anything wrong. I don't even think that he was expecting to be invited. And if he was, then that would have been a pretty unreasonable expectation. As for my parents, they also know and they are well aware of exactly why I stopped speaking to him. And in the beginning, they tried to patch things up but it didn't work. So eventually, they gave up on it as well. But they had never been more in favor of him or me. As far as I can remember, they had always tried to be fair to both of us, and that's actually why I was all the more surprised at their reaction recently, because it felt like they were being unreasonably biased towards him, and that had never happened. Anyway, it is what it is. Can't help it now. Update 1. Hey. So first things first. Thank you to everybody who commented. It was good to be reassured that this is not my fault and I don't have anything to be sorry about. All the emails from my parents that have been flooding my inbox ever since I put out the truth to everybody else in the family have been deleted, and I have blocked them everywhere so they can keep trying to make new accounts and get to me, but I'm not going to go back on what I had said about them. Besides, it's not even like I made anything and started spewing obnoxious false crap about them. I just put out the truth. In the email that I had sent to everybody in the family, I didn't even add anything about my personal feelings. I just mentioned the exact situation as it was and that's it. People were allowed to come to their own conclusions about what they wanted to do, and if people want to cut them off because of their behavior, then that's really not my headache. And on the day of the wedding, they had already accused me of trying to turn the rest of the family against Gerald, so I only did something they had already accused me of because why should I face the punishment without even committing the crime? Anyway, at least what I did was way less underhanded and pathetic than what they are trying to do right now. My cousins and a couple of other relatives have shown me the email that they sent out in response to mine saying that I have always been jealous and insecure of Gerald, and even though my brother had thrown a last-minute birthday party, it was only because I had gone out of my way to make him feel bad and that's why he had retaliated. They cooked up this incident that never even happened, where apparently, a couple of weeks after I had sent out the invitations to the rest of the family, I called Gerald up to taunt him about the fact that I was inviting the rest of the family but not him because he was simply not good enough to make the cut. Apparently, I had told Gerald that my in-laws are from a pretty well-to-do family and I didn't want them to know that my brother was a good-for-nothing freelancer. Now obviously, I haven't done anything of the sort and anyone who knows me well will refuse to believe anything of this kind. So the rest of the family hasn't been buying anything that they've been saying about me, which is why I haven't bothered to clarify anything because I know that they are lying and nobody is going to believe them. But I have to say, the fact that they have to resort to lying to make me look like the bad guy just so they can clean their own image and reputation is pretty hilarious. And in doing so, they're not even helping themselves. They're actually making things even worse for themselves. I honestly don't understand why they are so bent on making me the bad guy right now, especially when I don't even think that I have done anything to hurt them apart from that email. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, it's clear that they're desperate and are grasping at straws right now. But for me, this is a chapter that's done and dusted, and now I'm just gonna focus on my time as a newlywed because that's not gonna come back. I can deal with the drama later. I'm pretty sure that this is not going to be the end of this situation, and they are going to try their best to drag it out like chewing gum. Update 2. So it's been a week since my last update, and last evening, Gerald and my parents decided to add me to a conference call. They were both calling from burner phones, so I don't have those numbers saved, but it doesn't take much to know that it must have been them. I was at home with my wife, so I decided to pick up the call and speak to them because I wanted to mess with them, and I did. As soon as I picked up, I spent like the first 5 minutes pretending I couldn't hear them. And even though they had called me with the intention of yelling at me, they had to make sure that they were at least audible. So before they said anything, they had to coordinate with me, and it was very funny. Anyway, after that, they finally got down to business and started telling me that the rest of the family was not on speaking terms with them. Everyone was very upset about their behavior, and they thought that my parents and Gerald were extremely petty, so now they expect me to do something about it. I didn't know what they had in mind, so I asked them what they wanted me to do, even though I had no intention of agreeing to it. I decided to play along just for laughs, but of course they thought that I was being sincere. So they told me that a lot of things had been said by all of us, and at the end of the day the only thing that it was harming was our family's reputation as a whole. I thought that it was strange that they were saying that because, as far as I was concerned, this whole incident had done nothing to my image or reputation. People still liked me, but I guess they just wanted me to feel like this had anything to do with me or my image, so I would at least be a little open to whatever they were asking of me. Anyway, they told me that they wanted to put out another statement in an email saying that we had decided to sort things out amongst ourselves and had forgiven each other because, after all, we are still family. They said the only way that we would be able to fix our reputation right now, because they didn't want to become the laughingstock and content for gossiping for the rest of the family due to this incident. But unfortunately for them, I could see right through them. I knew that they were only willing to pretend that we had forgiven each other because they knew that nobody had bought any of the lies that they had been spreading about me. And if they didn't want to be ostracized from the rest of the family, they had to pretend like everything was fine between us once again now, and that I had forgiven them so the rest of the family would follow suit. But I was done playing around by then, so I bluntly refused and told them very clearly that it was they who wanted to fix their reputation, not me. So I really had no reason to play along and pretend like I had forgiven them. I also had a huge problem with the way they had worded everything that we had forgiven each other, because I don't think that they are in a position to forgive me. I haven't done anything wrong. I might have said some things in the heat of the moment, but at the end of the day, it was their decision to skip my wedding and attend the birthday party, and after that, whatever has happened, it has happened because of their behavior. Besides, after all the lies that they've been spreading about me, I don't want to look like a weakling and pretend that I have forgiven them, so I made it very clear to them that I was not in agreement with whatever they had proposed. And if they wanted to stay mad at me and continue to spread lies about me in the hopes that maybe somebody would believe them and they would be able to justify everything, they were completely welcome to do so. Of course, after that, my parents got really mad, and so did Gerald, and he told me that this was all my fault, that if I had just done the decent thing instead of being petty and not inviting him to such an important family event, then none of this would have even happened. It was clear that he felt snubbed, and for a moment, I felt bad, but then it was my wedding. I'm not obliged to invite anyone and everyone, especially when I don't even get along well with them, and they know that. So I said that to Gerald, and we got into a bit of a tiff over the phone. He called me petty, and I told him that he was stupid to even expect that I would be inviting him, especially after he had had pretty much no contact apart from family events for the past couple of years. If he had wanted me to be nice to him, maybe he should have behaved the same way with me. But as far as I can remember, he has never invited me to any of the events that he has hosted, though they have never been as significant as a wedding or even an engagement, but that's beside the point. The point is that he has never been nice to me, so I don't see why he expected to be invited to the wedding. Anyway, after a while, things just got too loud and annoying. Gerald was screeching and my parents were shouting about something else, and I couldn't make sense of anything, so I just hung up on them and I blocked those burner phone numbers as well. I wouldn't say that I totally regret it. I did have a bit of fun with them, but I have to say that if they call me again, I don't think I'll be picking up, because as entertaining as this was in the beginning, it got pretty taxing by the end, and I'm done. Update 3. Hi. So it's been a couple of days since my last update, and today in the morning at around 4, my phone started buzzing, and when I checked, it was an unknown number, so I didn't pick up because I was pretty sure that it was either Gerald or one of my parents calling. And again, it was 4 in the morning, so I had no intention of getting into a thing with them at that time, especially given the fact that I had to get to work in a couple of hours. But then, about half an hour after I didn't pick up the phone, we started hearing people shouting from outside our house and somebody ringing the doorbell non-stop while banging on the door as well. Obviously, it was very alarming and it took us a couple of minutes to process what was going on, but soon enough, my wife and I registered the fact that it was my parents and Gerald outside, and it was their voices that we were hearing. They insisted that we needed to open up and said that they needed to talk to us because what I was doing was ruining their lives since they had been completely cut off by the rest of the family and it was all my fault. Now had it been at any other time of the day, I might have felt mildly annoyed, but since it was literally 4 in the morning, I was furious because all things aside, they really cannot harass people like this, and they were actually being pretty loud, so I was sure that the neighbors could hear them as well, though they didn't say anything about it later on and were nice enough to pretend nothing had happened. I knew that they had been quite disturbed by the commotion outside and it was quite embarrassing for me. Anyway, when I heard them outside, I didn't even think twice. I just called the cops on them because I had had enough. For the time that it took for the cops to show up, my wife and I just sat in bed and let them scream themselves hoarse. We were both very upset by whatever was happening and so we didn't even get out of bed until the cops showed up. Then we explained the entire situation and had them taken off of our property, but by then we had already lost a lot of sleep and we had to skip work today. It's extremely annoying that we missed out on an entire day of work because of them and their nonsensical behavior, because I really can't imagine why they had to get so worked up about people not speaking to them at such a time. But anyway, we have had enough, and after this, if anything happens, I think we're going to have to file for a restraining order. Moving or changing numbers is a huge deal which might be expensive or time-consuming at the very least, so that's not going to be possible as of now. But that's the least that we can try, even though they haven't exactly threatened us. So I don't know if we have grounds for it or not. We're going to talk to a lawyer though, so let's just see how this unfolds. Update 4. Hi. So it's been a couple of days since the incident that happened in the morning, and after that, we spoke to a lawyer the very same evening. Since my parents and Gerald were just trespassing and causing a ruckus, but they hadn't actually hurt anyone or anything. They were just let off with a warning against disorderly conduct and no charges were pressed. But lucky for us, we still have grounds for a restraining order because of their behavior. So we decided to go ahead with it today and they were served with a notice. In a couple of days, we're going to appear in court and put an end to this, which is going to be a huge relief. I've already spoken to a bunch of people in my family about this. I don't see the point in hiding their behavior anymore, and it's actually shocking that they're acting like this, especially given the fact that before this, they had never even cared much about the rest of the family. And it's true. My parents were never the kind of people who were very close to the rest of the family. And as for Gerald, he hardly even speaks to anyone in the family. So having people cut them off, it really shouldn't affect them as much as it has. And I'm guessing that this isn't about the family cutting them off at all. This is just about them wanting to stir up trouble for me and that's it. Well, I hope they're happy now because the only person that they have ended up screwing things up for is themselves, and now they're going to have to face the consequences of their actions. It's so sad that so much drama could have been avoided if my parents and my brother could have just behaved like normal, reasonable people, but they had to go out of their way to embarrass themselves and, by extension, me as well. It's not as though I'm enjoying the process of this. It's actually pretty sad that I'm going to have to file a restraining order against my own family, but this situation calls for it and I don't have any other option. This is actually just pathetic. Update 5. Hey. So it has been 4 weeks since my last update, and recently, the 2-year restraining order against my family was granted, so that's pretty nice. The rest of the family is also in solidarity with us, which they have always been right from the beginning. But as of now, not only have they blocked them out of their lives completely and stopped inviting them to things, but they have also started keeping more in touch with me, making sure that I'm doing all right and checking up on me. And even though most of the time I feel completely fine, at certain points, I do feel like the stuff that had happened with my family. It's really sad, and I really appreciate the fact that the rest of the family is trying to make up for it. To have a support system like this, I don't think that there's anything in the world that I would trade this for. I feel particularly close to everyone, especially my cousins, since they have been at the forefront of everything, helping me out emotionally and even with practical matters, like putting me in touch with a good lawyer. So I'm very, very grateful for everything that everyone has done for me, and I think it's about time that I start a fresh chapter. My wife and I are going to be leaving for our honeymoon in a couple of days, and when we come back, I hope that things are going to feel like they have changed. I know that a change of scenery is exactly what we need, so I'm pretty excited about this. The next week and a half are going to be pretty great, and I'm just going to ignore everything to do with my parents or Gerald.